Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
U.S. lawmakers have warned Iran that any nuclear deal made with the Obama administration could easily be revoked. Just days after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed a joint session of Congress regarding the dangers of the emerging nuclear accord with the hardline Islamic Republic, a group of 47 Republican senators sent the Iranian leadership a letter warning that any agreement will be short-lived if it does not gain congressional approval. The letter, which was immediately condemned by the White House, cautions Tehran that any deal between Iran and the U.S. that did not meet with congressional approval would simply be a deal between President Obama and Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. They wrote that the next president could revoke such an agreement with a stroke of a pen, and future Congresses could modify the terms of the agreement at any time. This move comes as President Obama has sought to bypass legislators on the emerging deal, which Bibi Netanyahu warned could lead to a nuclear-armed Iran and could spark an atomic arms race in the Middle East.
As President Obama presses ahead to reach the deal with Iran, the top United Nations nuclear watchdog organization released a report charging Tehran with still refusing to answer long-standing questions about work on its suspected weapons program. Officials at the International Atomic Energy Agency say that they remain concerned over the possible existence of undisclosed nuclear-related activities in the rogue nation and detailed alleged involvement of its military-related groups, as well as activities believed to be related to the development of a nuclear payload for missiles. In fact, according to IAEA Director Yukiya Amano, the Islamic Republic has failed to provide his agency with critical information over explosive tests and other research regarding the defensive use of atomic energy. Iranian officials are renowned for being masters of the diplomatic sleight of hand, with a long record of procrastination, deception, stalling, and stonewalling international nuclear inspectors. Meanwhile, another report from the UN is blasting the country for what it points to as a deeply troubling number of executions. Yochanan has more on that story.
Yes, Aaron. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has released a report detailing horrific rights violations in Iran against women, religious minorities, including Christians, journalists, and activists. According to their research, Iran executed at least 500 people last year and possibly many more. A statement released by Ban's office said the Secretary General remains deeply troubled by the continuing large number of executions, including political prisoners and juveniles. The document also noted that the Islamic Republic has not kept its commitment to extend protection to all religious groups and to amend legislation that discriminates against minority groups. Victims were allegedly tortured and held for months in solitary confinement with no access to a lawyer, and they risked the death penalty for crimes such as corruption on earth and enmity against Allah.
Muslim terrorists are continuing to slaughter Christians in Nigeria. The Islamic Boko Haram terror group carried out 5 bombings this past week that claimed the lives of at least 50 people and wounded nearly 150 others in the northeastern city of Maiduguri in attacks targeting crowded markets and a bus station. Many children were reported to be among the dead and wounded. Boko Haram has abducted hundreds of Nigerians and forced women and girls as young as 7 years old to be suicide bombers. More than 13,000 people have been killed over the past 6 years in the group's ongoing brutal attempts to carve out an Islamic state in the West African nation.
A British organization has banned an advertisement encouraging travel to Israel. Officials in the United Kingdom rejected the ad created by the Israeli Ministry of Tourism because they claim it implies that the Old City of Jerusalem is part of Israel. In an absolutely shocking move, Britain's advertising watchdog nixed the newspaper brochure depicting the Old City of Jerusalem with the words, "Israel has it all." The Advertising Standards Association ruled that the title of the pamphlet, Israel, Land of Creation, and references to Old City attractions were misleading. Therefore, the ad could not appear again in its current format. The watchdog group said that the advertisement would mislead customers into believing that the Old City was part of Jerusalem. The Old City is part of the Jewish capital and has been since 1967. Britain's anti-Israel stance has become so unabashed that it's actually hosting a forum to question the legitimacy of the Jewish state. Aaron has that story.
That's right, Yochanan. As post-Second World War levels of anti-Semitism reach a record high in the United Kingdom and throughout Europe, a British university is about to host a seminar that will question the very existence of the world's only Jewish state. The University of Southampton is planning to hold the three-day symposium in April, focused on themes of legitimacy posed by Israel's very nature. British Member of Parliament Mark Hoban is blasting the upcoming conference as provocative and unhelpful, and is calling on leadership at the academic institution to cancel the event. A recent poll found that half of British Jewry expressed fear that they have no long-term future in the UK or Europe, while a separate poll revealed that nearly 1 out of every 2 Britons admit to holding anti-Semitic views.
Israel has announced that it is going to double the amount of water it provides to the Gaza Strip to avert a shortage in the coastal enclave. The move comes despite the fact that the territory is run by the Hamas terrorist organization, which has launched thousands of rockets into Israel. The decision means that Israel will now provide the Gaza Strip with 10 million cubic meters of water per year. Israeli officials voiced the hope that Hamas would not steal the water from the Palestinian people, as it stole building materials provided to Gaza for construction and infrastructure. Hamas used the raw materials to build underground terror tunnels with the intent to kidnap and murder Israeli citizens.
The recent Jewish holiday of Purim was marred by a terror attack in the holy city of Jerusalem. In renewed Arab violence, a Palestinian terrorist rammed his vehicle into a group of female police officers and pedestrians on the city's main north-south thoroughfare along the light rail tracks, injuring 7 people. He then got out of his car armed with a knife and an axe and tried to stab a 51-year-old bicyclist before he was shot and captured by a police officer at the scene. The assailant was identified by police as a 22-year-old Arab resident of Jerusalem, Mohammed Mahmoud Abdel Salema. 5 separate terror attacks have been carried out in the same area over the past year. Police say that only the swift response of the police officer prevented a far more serious incident.
Hours after that vehicular attack, Palestinian vandals are suspected of seriously damaging several Jewish gravestones in the city's ancient Mount of Olives cemetery. The site has been the scene of repeated Arab vandalism in the past. It's the most ancient Jewish burial ground in the world. There are more than 150,000 Jewish graves in the cemetery, including those of the biblical prophets Zechariah, Haggai, and Malachi. The site overlooks the Temple Mount and the city of David.
Archaeologists in Galilee are claiming to have discovered the home of Jesus. According to researchers, the hillside house in northern Israel dates back 2 millennia and may be the Nazareth home where Jesus was raised. The stone and mortar structure was first identified in the 1880s, and many believe it's likely that it's where Mary and Joseph resided. Media reports explained that the ruins of the house were incorporated into a Byzantine-era church that was later revered by the Crusaders. British archaeologist Dr. Ken Dark investigated the site and says that there is no good reason not to believe that Jesus once lived in this Galilee home.
Another exciting Israeli technology has gone mobile. Using the sense of smell, Sniff Phone can detect cancer. Developed by a professor at Israel's famed Technion, Sniff Phone is reportedly able to smell a user's breath to determine if they have cancer or other serious diseases. The device will be able to detect the odor of cancer cells and thereby decipher tumors. According to Technion professor Hossam Haik, who developed the technology, he said the system, which is currently being funded by the European Commission, has a 90% accuracy rate.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a beautiful day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. My guest today is Jeremy Sultan, the Knesset insider. Jeremy, thank you for being on the show.
It's a pleasure.
Elections coming up next week in Israel. Everyone's talking about it. The media in Israel is making this like a showdown between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his challenger, Isaac Herzog. Is this a real thing, or does the Prime Minister have this locked up?
Well, we have an election for the legislative branch of government, and that's the Knesset. The road to the Prime Minister's chair starts with our Knesset election, but there are two phases afterwards. There's the President's residence, and then there's a vote of approval of a majority of the Parliament members. So if we're talking about the first part, we do see that the Prime Minister and his chief opponent, the opposition leader, Bougie Herzog, are in a head-to-head race. But the minute we start talking about the other parties and the various potential scenarios that we can see in terms of building the next coalition government, it looks like Netanyahu has this one, I would say, wouldn't say necessarily in the bag, but at this current point of time, it's looking very good for the Prime Minister.
Now, you run one of the premier sites that take the polls from all around the country and then analyze them. Yet in recent elections, we saw that the polls really just missed the numbers right before the election. Are you expecting that to happen, or do you think the polls are going to hold?
Well, you always have the undecided vote, and there is a little bit of a shift that you are going to have. But what we have in KnessetJeremy.com is an interesting model where we take an average of the polls of the last week, we match them against the trend of the previous week average, and then we see where it is that we expect things to go. In the last election, this was a very successful model. Within one Knesset seat, we were able to predict 8 of the 12 seats. The 12 parties, rather, that were elected to the previous Knesset. Of course, last time the big surprise was Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid party, which was able to take a lot of seats from the undecided voters that were at either Likud, Labor, or Bayit Yehudi at that time, and bring them towards them on election day.
You mentioned last election surprise. Who could possibly be the surprise of this election?
Well, I think the Moshe Kachlon and the Kulanu party are in a great position to be the surprise of this election. Anytime you're coming in with a fresh new party, when you don't have to worry about what your entire list has either accomplished or not accomplished, and you're offering something new, that's something that resonates a lot with the Israeli people.
One of the big stories of this election is the Israel Beitenu party, in that it's gone from so many seats to so little seats. Do you think that's actually going to occur, or do you think the Israel Beitenu party in the end will try to pull out a victory there?
Well, of course they're going to try to pull out a victory, but they have 13 seats in the current Knesset. We see that they're in single digits right now for the home stretch. I expect that Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman is going to do whatever he can to go ahead and really make that push towards the election day itself to gather as many voters as he can. But right now it looks like he's probably going to be one of the biggest losers of this election.
One of the big issues of the election is Bibi's speech at the Congress. Why was that such a big deal? I mean, pretty much all the parties are against Iran and Iran's nuclear program. Why are they making it such an issue?
Well, it becomes an issue anytime you see that the Prime Minister feels very strongly about something. If you're running against him, you're going to have to take the other side of that issue. And that's really what you had if you're looking at Herzog or Livni or Lapid. Most of the people running against the Prime Minister had to go ahead and take the other position on that.
One of the other things that we saw is at the beginning, when the elections were called, the Bayit Yehudi was riding high in the polls, and then slowly but slowly they started going down. Where's that coming from?
Well, it's coming from 3 different places. One was there was the decision to put someone on the list that did not go over so popular, and in the end he was not put on the final list. Another thing was a lot of voters feeling that they were afraid that the Prime Minister might not be re-elected, and therefore they moved over from the Bayit Yehudi to the Likud. And the third side is the minute that they saw that the Yachad party, led by former Shas leader Eli Yishai, was passing the polls in every single poll. That made a lot of people who were hesitant to not have their vote thrown away vote for that party. We have an electoral threshold here in Israel where anyone who does not get 3.25% of the vote will not be in the next Knesset.
Everyone's talking about already phase 2, what's going to happen with the coalition government, who's going to sit in it, and everyone assumes that there won't be surprises, that the ultra-Orthodox parties won't sit with Yair Lapid, who's a secularist, and that the Arab Party won't sit with Israel Beitenu, and Israel Beitenu won't sit with Meretz. Can we expect some surprises when it's all over?
You're always going to have surprises. That's the beautiful thing about Israeli politics. But if you're a betting person, you have to put money on something. Again, the way that we're looking at the polls today, it looks like Netanyahu is going to be reelected to a 4th term. Herzog would really have to pull a rabbit out of the hat to really go ahead and gather what he needs in terms of parties that would be willing to sit in his future coalition.
Jeremy, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
What I would like to tell everybody who are watching here at home is that Israel might be a complicated place. Our politics might be hard to understand, but we're really an amazing country, an amazing people, and we really love our friends in the international community. I'd like to invite all of you to come over here to Israel to tour, to see the Holy Land, and really enjoy what is the best and most beautiful place on this planet.
Thank you.
I'm biased.
Thank you, Jeremy, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, shining light from Israel.
Of all the countries that have come into existence in the last century, no country's birth certificate is more legitimate than that of Israel. One reason is that many of the men who founded the country, Theodore Herzl, Zeb Jabotinsky, David Ben-Gurion, Menachem Begin, Yitzhak Shamir, were either lawyers or had legal training. They were obsessed with making it legal. Unlike almost every other country, lawyers, not generals, were the midwives of Israel's birth, or more accurately, rebirth, since it had existed as an independent country twice before in history. Step by legal step, Israel moved legally toward nationhood, from the Balfour Declaration in 1917 to the San Remo Agreement in 1920 to the League of Nations Resolution in 1922 to the Anglo-American Convention on Palestine in 1924 to the partition of land ordained by the United Nations in 1947 into a nation-state for the Jewish people and an Arab state. Yet immediately upon its lawful establishment in 1948 as the nation-state of the Jewish people, Israel was illegally attacked by all the surrounding Arab states, as well as by elements of the local Arab population. In defending its right to exist during that war, Israel lost 1% of its population, including many civilians and Holocaust survivors. It also lost some of the land assigned to it by the United Nations. It captured other land from the aggressors that was originally assigned to the Arab state. The end result of that war against Israel was an armistice line that prevailed until 1967, when Israel was once again attacked by Jordan during Israel's war with Egypt and Syria. Between 1948 and 1967, despite the armistice, Arab terrorists continued to infiltrate Israeli borders and to injure and kill Israeli citizens. That was part of an official policy by the surrounding governments and by leaders of local Palestinian groups. All of it was in violation, obvious violation of international law. Following the establishment of Israel, a transfer of populations occurred. Several 100,000 Arabs who fled from Israel during the War of Independence were not allowed to return. Some had chosen to leave, assured by their Arab leaders that the fledgling country would not last a week. Others were forced to leave. At that time, approximately the same number of Jews were forced to leave Arab countries, another violation of international law, where they had lived for thousands of years. The difference was that Arab countries kept the Arabs who left Israel in refugee camps, where many of them still live more than half a century after leaving Israel. And Israel, on the other hand, fully integrated all the Jewish refugees from Arab countries into Israeli society, where many of their descendants now serve in the highest positions of Israeli life. Israel's establishment as the nation-state of the Jewish people by entirely lawful means is quite remarkable for several reasons. First, there is no country in the world that is as surrounded by hostile enemies as is Israel. It's been that way since 1948. Yet Israel sought the way of the pen rather than of the sword. It has needed the sword to survive, but its preference has always been for the pen. That is, for peaceful negotiations. Its peace treaty with Egypt in 1978, its peaceful abandonment of Gaza in 2005, and its many attempts to reach a peace agreement with the Palestinians are examples. Yet despite its entirely lawful origins, Israel is the only country in the world today whose origins, and therefore its very legitimacy, have been questioned by the General Assembly of the United Nations, by numerous member nations, and by many organizations that claim the mantle of human rights and the rule of law. Ironically, current attacks on Israel's legitimacy have taken the form of lawfare, the use of international law as a weapon. Any fair tribunal that judged Israel by universal standards would reject such attacks out of hand. But alas, international courts like the UN itself have been packed by those bitterly antagonistic to the nation state of the Jewish people. For example, the misnamed International Court of Justice refuses to acknowledge that Israel, a country that deals with terror attacks and the threats of terror attacks on a regular basis, has any special security needs. As I've demonstrated, this phenomenon, questioning the very right of Israel to exist as the nation state of the Jewish people, cannot be explained on legal grounds or on any other rational basis for that matter. So then, how can this worldwide attack on Israel alone be explained? In only one way. It is pure bigotry. And there's a word for this bigotry: anti-Semitism. If you have a better explanation for why the one country in the world whose right to exist is denied is also the one country that is the nation state of the Jewish people, I ask you, what is it? I'm Alan Dershowitz, professor of law at Harvard University for Prager University.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
For I will take you from among the nations, gather you out of all countries, and bring you into your own land.
Over the past 35 years, the International Christian Embassy have been actively engaged in the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. More than 120,000 Jews have been helped by the Christian Embassy to come back from the four corners of the world here to the land of Israel. The main focal point was always the former Soviet Union, and the people which came to Israel were Russians or from the Ukraine or from Belarus. Today we see a major shift taking place where for the first time the majority of Jewish people which are coming to Israel do come from first world countries.
The Hebrew word Aliyah refers to the immigration of Jews from the diaspora to the land of Israel. According to recent statistics published by the Jewish Agency for Israel, immigration to Israel continued to increase in 2014 by 32% overall. While Aliyah numbers from Western Europe were up 177% in 2014, France alone saw its Aliyah numbers increase by 289%.
I think that I can clearly tell you that there is a greater interest among French Jews to move to Israel, to make Aliyah, or to consider Aliyah. It is not an operation like an Aliyah operation like we saw from countries like Ethiopia or Russia after the Iron Curtain was lifted, but we see here a great interest, and I believe this is something that is going to grow in this coming year.
Ukraine is another European country that has seen a significant increase in Aliyah in 2014. A struggling economy and continued tensions with Russia have contributed to many Ukrainian Jews considering the idea of moving to Israel. Penina Zubarev and her family made Aliyah from Ukraine in 2009. For the Zubarev family, starting a new life in Israel was a challenge.
Now it's a lot of Ukrainian Jews think about to leave Ukraine because it's so difficult time now to make money, to care about family. If you decide to leave Ukraine, you lose your Ukrainian citizenship and all benefits.
There is something in the atmosphere that is uncomfortable in some places, and people think, what do I do next? And I'm happy that the Jewish people consider Israel, their homeland, as the best alternative. If I can send a message to the Christian friends of Israel around the world, is please do two things. One thing is donate. Give the money that is necessary for the Israeli institutions to make the best way of Aliyah. And the second thing is to pray, because we need the prayers. We need to be in your hearts like we know we are already in, and we need to build this bridge of solidarity, working together for the fulfillment of the biblical prophecy.
As you have seen, we are living in a very special time of human history. God is opening a unique window of opportunity for the global body of Christ to actively be involved with the return of the Jewish people back to the land of Israel. Today, you personally can be involved with the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. You can help the Jewish people to return back to the land of their fathers, like the prophets of old foretold. Your donation and your prayer can make sure that the prophetic destiny of the Jewish people will become a reality today. So I want to invite you today to pray for the Aliyah of the Jewish people. Pray for the work of the Christian embassy as we help the Jewish people to return back, but also consider making a generous gift in order to help us to return Jewish people from France, from the Ukraine, back to the land of Israel. We need your support, we need your prayers. May the Lord bless you richly out of Jerusalem.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rome.
And I'm Erin Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.